I'm washed. There was a time on this channel when everyone was like, oh my god, Kishimoto must be taking notes from Nick somewhere. He's got a secret YouTube account and he's watching Nick's videos in Japanese translated by AI. Because for what felt like years, I simply couldn't miss with my Boruto theorizing. I predicted Himawari being a Jinchuriki. I predicted Kashin Koji having future sight. I predicted Mitsuki coming to the aid of Boruto, possibly due to his connection to nature energy. Oh wait. No, I got that one. But even though in chapter 14 I did get the minor detail of Mitsuki coming to Boruto's help correct, I'm gonna put my hand up on this one and say I missed in pretty much all other regards. Ino did not interrogate Boruto. She did not sit down Team 10 and tell them about Boruto's innocence. In fact, she went the direct opposite way, telling Shikamaru to essentially get stuffed for wanting to try and help Boruto, which means that Ino will never be privy to the information inside Boruto's head, which means for the moment that Team 10 and Himawari aren't having their allegiances shaken anytime soon. But it doesn't stop there, because I was also wrong about the 5th Shinju. And you guys were right. And you know what? That's fine. That's fine with me. Because each and every single one of you, yes, including you, Brian, and you, Mark, and you, Charles, and I would say a female name, but we all know they're not watching. You are all my students. And one day, the student surpasses the master. That just means I'm a good teacher. Or it means I forgot that Shinki existed until a couple of chapters ago. And genuinely, who could blame me? So if you somehow haven't picked up the context by now, chapter 14 of Two Blue Vortex has leaked. And while this chapter is almost entirely yapping, it's important yapping that gives us a really good measuring stick on where the allegiances currently lie in Konoha and outside of it. Whether it's Ibiki slamming Boruto's head off the table like Batman and the Joker, Konohamaru being blown away by the reveal of the existence of the Shinju, or Kankuro calling in Shikamaru to tell him that his nephew has gone missing, in a sense, a lot was revealed in chapter 14. And while this chapter feels more like a setup chapter than a chapter that stands on its own, sometimes the setup gives us more to talk about than the action. And that may very well be the case today. Because today we're talking chapter 14 of Two Blue Vortex Explained. Before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're feeling particularly generous and want to hear me talk about other anime and manga, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. Or if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow the brand new channel that I created with Stephen He, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So chapter 14 of Two Blue Vortex is kind of a roller coaster ride. Basically everything that I thought was gonna happen didn't, and Boruto ends up being in prison for less time than Jeffrey Epstein. Kind of makes you wonder what Ikimoto's currently trying to cook, why catching Boruto was even needed if he was just gonna escape in the same chapter that he's being interrogated. And if I could be so incredibly honest, it feels as though for the last couple of chapters, Ikimoto's just been doing stuff to do it. But hey, who knows? Maybe he's cooking. Still better than JJK, so let's get right into it. The chapter opens with Boruto with his head slumped, handcuffed to a chair. Well, not necessarily handcuffed to a chair, but handcuffed with his arms around the back of a chair. And it's in this position that Boruto wakes up, implying that up until this moment, he was unconscious. And when Boruto wakes up, he finds himself sat across the desk from Konohamaru and Ibiki. So yeah, no Ino. Now, obviously, this isn't the craziest twist of all time. Obviously, Ibiki is a Tokubetsu Jonin simply based off the fact that his interrogation skills are so next level. And considering the fact that Boruto is accused of killing Naruto, I guess you'd want to send your more brutal of your two-head interrogators. Especially with Ibiki's sterling record of basically getting any and all information he needs out of people he's interrogating. However, still feels like a weird bureaucratic move. Like, yeah, I get that Inojin's in the hospital and therefore Ino probably wants to be with Inojin, but only one of your interrogators guarantees that you get all the information that you need out of the person you're interrogating. And when the information that they're holding on to is as important as the information that Boruto is holding on to, you send out your best pitcher. But Inojin being in the hospital is a pretty good excuse for Ino not being there. Konohamaru then opens the conversation by saying, "It seems you've woken up. Himawari healed your wound," which all but confirms to us that Himawari still has feelings of love for Boruto and probably didn't want him dead, though she could have been coerced into healing him so that he could be interrogated. coordinated. We can't really say. We then cut back to Boruto, who's trying to actively wave hand seals behind his own back. But Konohamaru catches on to him and tells him that those handcuffs seal all jutsus. Regardless of how many hand signs you weave, no jutsu will be fired. He even goes on to say that even your specialty in space-time ninjutsu cannot be used. He then continues on by saying, don't even try to break it. While it is electronically controlled, it's built to be resistant to impacts. Trying to break it will only end up injuring you. Now, to me, making the sealing handcuffs electronically controlled is not the best idea of all time. Like, yeah, I get that Amado made them, and so they're going to be as techy as possible. But you're telling me to break out of these handcuffs, all somebody needs to do is use a little bit of lightning release on them, and then boom, you're free. On top of this, as we'll learn later, these handcuffs have a pretty massive weakness that also has nothing to do with the release of ninjutsu. Now, Boruto, after he gets this important exposition about how he's not going anywhere, asks Konohamaru his first question. Are the others okay? Did the enemies get away? And now Konohamaru answers him by saying that the enemies have withdrawn, telling him that not only have they withdrawn, but also that the chakra signatures haven't been detected anywhere in the village or around it, implying something that we all kind of knew already, which is that the Shinju hideout is nowhere near Konoha and probably exists in its own dimension, and therefore it's impossible to pick up the chakra signatures of the Shinju while they're in their hideout, but at least that's now been confirmed. Konohamaru goes on to say, in the battle, a couple of soldiers were killed, but the important people, the people who were being targeted, like Sarada and Himawari, they were all fine. On top of that, the three members of Team 10 and Inashikacho are all also okay. So as long as you weren't a wall guard who got turned into a tree ornament, you're having a great day. We then cut to the page that got leaked by the official Boruto page, which showed Sakura using medical ninjutsu on Inujin's chest. On this page, we see Sakura talking about how she can barely detect that he was pierced through the chest at all because the healing done by Himawari was so absolutely complete. This good news incentivized Chocho to kick into the conversation and says, so, is everything all right? To which Shikadai follows up by saying he's not reacting at all, and Ino chips in by saying, will he regain consciousness? Now, to this point, the Sakura says something that I found rather odd ever since this page was leaked. Leaked. She says, it seems as though the flow of chakra has been halted, but it's okay because I should be able to restore the flow of chakra manually. She then follows us up by saying he'll eventually wake up. It was the right decision to bring him here. Now, this feels like a classic Ikemoto needless addition. What we're essentially accomplishing by saying this is that Himawari has the ability to heal people, but when she heals them, the place where they're punctured or hurt has its chakra flow halted. Now, that's odd, but it also doesn't really mean anything. It just means that Himawari has the ability to heal bodies and not chakra networks. But that's probably not important information. And by telling us that Inujin's chakra flow is halted, it feels as though Ikemoto is trying to hint at something else that's gonna happen related to Inujin down the line. See, because Sakura could have just said, oh yeah, he was injured really badly, and although he's healed, it's gonna take a second for him to regain consciousness. Bing, bang, boom. And yet, for some reason, we're talking about the halting of his chakra flow. Now, as to whether that has to do with the wood that pierced him or the power that healed him, deciding to give us the exposition that Inujin's chakra flow is halted is odd. However, halting chakra flow is something that's not uncommon in the Naruto universe. Or whether it's the Gentle Fist or a tailed beast inside of a Jinchuriki disrupting the chakra flow of its Jinchuriki to break them out of Genjutsu, the disruption of chakra flow is something we see fairly often in the Naruto universe. However, it's that second circumstance that I'm more interested in. See, because now that Inujin has had his chakra flow halted for a couple of hours at least, who's to say that the experience he has undergone is much different from what a tailed beast does to a Jinchuriki to break them out of Genjutsu? What is the omnipotence affecting the world, if not simply one of the strongest Genjutsus we've ever seen? But to hear more on that theory, you're gonna have to check in for Sunday's video, so make sure you hit that notification bell. I got some things right from this chapter. It was just the ones you yelled at me about that I got wrong. Please, I still have validity as a YouTuber. Say one thing you like about me in the comments, and the nicest thing gets a kiss. Now, Himawari responds to the news that bringing Inujin to the hospital was the right thing to do by saying, that's good. And Ino, who looks young enough nowadays to be running around with her son, stares down at her son with dismay on her face. I mean, man, everybody else is aging. Not Ino, apparently. I wonder who Ikemoto's favorite is. We then cut back to the interrogation, where Konohamaru is saying, well, Boruto, it seems we can now talk face to face. I have a mountain of things I want to ask you. And while Boruto is stonewalling Konohamaru, we see that everybody's favorite characters are in attendance for this interrogation. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, Koharu and Hamura, the village elders who have never once made a good decision and yet somehow still hold on to a position of power, a lot like a certain country I live in, are in attendance. 100 years old and still dictating a future that they won't be a part of. Great. That sounds like a really good governmental system. Age limits. Oh, you're 70? Go fucking eat porridge, bitch. You shouldn't be governing.
Oh, Nick, you won't be talking like that when you're 70.
Yeah, I will. Take my autonomy away from me. You think I don't want to be sitting in a rocking chair yelling about how I don't understand the new generation right now? But I do understand the new generation. Everyone's like, oh, skippity toilet's so weird. Oh, I don't understand how they talk. We had annoying Orange and Fred. You know what that probably sounded like to somebody born in 1960? Anyways, back to the interrogation. Konohamaru was asking, first, those guys who attacked Konoha, who were they? And it's like, great question, man. The way you could have got the answer to this if Ino was present, lickety split, but let's move on. Konohamaru then follows this question up with another one and asks, why were Himawari and Sarada targeted? And to this point that it's revealed that the elders aren't the only people behind the one-way glass, as Shikamaru is also watching this interrogation. It's then revealed that the entirety of the world is one-way glass for Ada, as she is also watching this interrogation. And as she sits in what I presume to be her and Kawaki's house, with Daemon laying in her lap, she says the interrogation of Boruto has started. And it's at this point that Daemon begins to laugh at Kawaki, saying, things are getting bad, Kawaki. What are you gonna do if he spills the truth about your situation? Daemon then immediately starts to cut real deep, going on to say, I'm sure you don't think the two of you are opposites. The part of Boruto killing Naruto was a mere lie made up by you. I wonder how everyone's gonna react when they find out that truth. Now, I don't know if it's been revealed prior to this moment that Daemon was unaffected by omnipotence, but I did theorize in my last video that because he was unaffected by Ada's charm Shinjutsu, that there's a fair chance he would also be unaffected by omnipotence. And this seems to all but confirm those suspicions. But this is rather interesting. See, it's interesting because I don't know if it was a willing omission to make sure that Daemon wasn't affected by omnipotence by Ada, or if this just reveals to us that Shinjutsu doesn't work on your siblings. See, because obviously with the charm Shinjutsu, the rule for Ada not attracting Daemon was because they're brother and sister. And therefore that felt like Kishimoto's way of going like, hey, don't worry, we're not doing the Oshinoko thing here. But Daemon also not being affected by the omnipotence blast that hit the entirety of the world now makes Daemon unaffected by two different types of omnipotence. And therefore what might be being revealed to us is that omnipotence is only able to affect people outside of your own lineage, which could be a defense system put into the Shinjutsu by the Otsutsuki, as the Otsutsuki, who may be using omnipotence all the time, don't want to be constantly wiping the memories, ideas, and personalities of their fellow Otsutsuki. And this seems to be backed up by the fact that Boruto and Kawaki are unaffected. Now, while this might have seemed obvious, I did genuinely think that the reason that Daemon was unaffected is because Ikimoto didn't want him fiending over his own sister. But anyways, Ada chips in and says, I told you to stop it, Daemon. Don't pick on Kawaki, which seems to imply that for some reason, she's still fascinated with him. Kawaki goes on to say that nothing will change. Whatever Boruto is claiming won't change the fact that he's the reason that Naruto is gone. And, I'm sorry, what now? Kawaki goes on to back up this point by saying, you never know when an Otsutsuki is gonna go out of control. That's his true character. He'll snap sooner or later. And thus what Kawaki seems to be saying here isn't all that out of line with what we knew about Kawaki, as he's basically saying that Boruto's presence on Earth is the reason that Naruto isn't on Earth, and the reason that Kawaki had to put him in the Daikokuten. And thus the blame for why Kawaki doesn't get to spend time with Naruto right now is because Boruto is still alive and therefore persisting as a possible threat to Naruto. Kawaki continues by saying, prior to Boruto snapping and letting the Otsutsuki rage inside of him, he needs to extract the information that Boruto has about these mysterious Shinju in order to allow him to better deal with them. And it's at this point that it's revealed that Mitsuki's in his usual place, which is immediately outside of Kawaki's house. And he is more likely than not listening to this conversation, but we obviously can't say for certain. We then cut back to the interrogation, which is now more just like an interview, as Konohamaru gawks at the information that Boruto has freely given him. To which Boruto, through no prompting of Konohamaru or Ibiki, responds by saying, Right. It reflects the chakra of who's ever eaten by the claw grime, and thus who's ever turned into a tree is reflected as the Shinju. The guy we fought earlier, Hidari, was created from Sasuke. Boruto continues on by saying, I saw Sasuke get turned into a tree with my own eyes. He then says that Matsuri's original form was Moegi. And I genuinely, for the life of me, don't know if they've ever said Matsuri's name, but if they haven't, I would understand why they haven't. Because Konohamaru responds in a way that's probably going to confuse some people that don't know a lot about Japan, because he simply responds by saying the Matsuri Festival. And for those of you who don't know, the Matsuri Festival is one of the quirkier things in Japan. Well, I don't know if it's quirky, it's actually rather important, but we'll get into it. See, the Matsuri Festival, also known as the Kanamara Matsuri, is a Japanese festival held every spring at the Kanayama Shrine. And this is an entire festival dedicated to we'll call them phalluses. See, the Kanayama Shrine is built for the Shinto gods Kanayama Hiko and Kanayama Hime. Now, both of these gods are the gods of blacksmithing, metalsmithing, and metalworks. However, they're also prayed to, rather perplexingly, for things like easy childbirth, happy marriages, and more recently, protection from STIs. And that's why Kanamari Matsuri started in 1969. Now, I don't believe that's why Moegi is called Matsuri, but I do believe that the reason that Moegi Shinju is called Matsuri is because she seems to be responsible for the creation of other Shinju. And as Kanayama, who is the god who's being worshipped, Kanamara Matsuri is the god that's prayed to for easy childbirth. It seems as though the name Matsuri was given because she's essentially the mother of the Shinju. And I feel as though I would have made the connection if I heard her name earlier, but I feel as though I haven't heard her name until right now. But I could be wrong. Now, Boruto warns Konohamaru and says, be careful, sensei. Matsuri's target is you. And this catches Konohamaru by surprise. And I wish I could tell you what he said, but currently the leaks that I'm looking at say that he says, lorem ipsum dolor sit amet consectium adipiscing elu. It's been a while since I took Latin. And that's the beauty of trying to be first, is you don't always get the greatest leaks. But we then cut to Amado, who's having a conversation with, I genuinely don't know. While he's chiefing down cigarettes, he's talking about the Ten Tails, and about how the Ten Tails' original purpose is to eat Notsutsuki and spread its roots down into the planet it's currently on, to absorb all of the available chakra on that planet and create a chakra fruit for consumption by a high-ranking Otsutsuki, and that the Ten Tails do this by instinct, and that they have no higher thought processes. However, Amado says he's since received intelligence that makes him believe that we should no longer assume these Ten Tails are operating based on instinct alone, and that instead that these Ten Tails or these Shinjus have intellectual curiosity, and what those who have intellectual curiosity look for is emotional attachments and knowledge based off new experiences. That is to say that the Shinju most likely want information. Now, Ibiki and Konohamaru apparently both hear this, even though we've gotten multiple wide shots of the entire room that they're in and Amado doesn't appear to be in it. But I'm just gonna assume that Amado's outside watching the interrogation and that they can hear what he said from outside the interrogation room. I don't know where he is. However, knowing where he is isn't the necessary thing here. What the necessary thing to know here is, how did Amato acquire this information? See, the only people who would be privy to the idea that the Shinju were trying to collect information would be Kashin Koji and Boruto. And maybe Himawari, and maybe Sarada, because Hidari does reveal to Sarada in his battle against Sarada and Boruto that he doesn't know who he is, and therefore he's trying to consume Sarada so he can figure out who he is, because that's the only person he feels as though he's pulled towards. Now, I would say that there's a possibility that Sumire was the person who was able to feed him that information, but Sumire is unconscious for the majority of that fight. Though Sumire, prior to being knocked out, does hear that he came to Konoha trying to figure out some answers to questions about his identity, though she doesn't get the whole spiel that he gives to Sarada. But there are other possible explanations, and we'll be talking about that in Tuesday's video, so hit the bell, give it a little ring, 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 baby. We then come back to the interview where Konohamaru is saying, by eating Sarada, Hima, and me, the Shinju will receive information. Most likely in response to what Amado said, and not in response to something Boruto said off screen. Boruto answered this by saying, most likely that is the case, and their leader Jura is the one instigating that process. Boruto goes on to say that Jura is in a league of his own. It has no original form like seen with Moegi and Sasuke. Jura is the, and hold for patting on the back, incarnation of the Ten Tails.
Oh, Nick, everybody knows that Jura's the incarnation of the Ten Tails. When Kurama sniffed him out, he said that damn Ten Tails. We've known for like at least 5 chapters that Jura is the Ten Tails.
Yeah, we kind of have, but it's never been hardly confirmed until this moment. And also, Kurama saying, oh, the damn Ten Tails isn't all that specific when you consider the fact that all of the Shinju are referred to as Ten Tails like half the time. So this is the first real time that it's been specified that Jura and Jura alone is the vessel of the emaciated Ten Tails. And who was the first to that? This guy with 2 thumbs.
Oh, Nick, it was Shinky the whole time. You couldn't see his face marks.
No, I was too busy focusing on Jura. I'm compensating. I'm upset. Overcompensating? Never. Would a man with a water bottle this big overcompensate for anything? Boruto then goes on to say, talking about Jura, it's the core of the crisis we're currently facing. It is the culprit behind all of the devastation we've seen in the past couple of hours. And this news leaves everybody who's watching the interview in shock, as Amado, Koharu, and Hamura all sit in stunned silence. Boruto then continues on by saying, to make a long story short, if I defeat Jura, the threat facing this world disappears. Konohamaru then asks him, why? Why can you say that? How do you know if you defeat Jura, the crisis will be averted? But Boruto sits in silence as Konohamaru continues to press him, telling him, Boruto, answer me. It's up to me to decide whether or not your story is credible. After that, ... implying that if he can't get the story out of him, Ibiki will. Boruto then tells him that the source of information is a man, but it's too bad because that man's identity cannot be revealed. As Boruto doesn't want to snitch on Kashin Koji, and honestly, good job, young lord. Stitches get snitches. I'm pretty sure that's what they say. As a young gangland associated man from the rough and tumble streets of New Hampshire, I know what I'm talking about. Boruto goes on to say he doesn't want you to know his identity for your safety, which I find perplexing. I mean, obviously Kashin Koji doesn't want to be associated with Konoha right now because so far as they know, he popped in, tried to steal Kawaki, killed Ao, tried to steal a scroll, fought against Kakashi, and now is actively working with Boruto, so why would they trust Kashin Koji? But there's really no reason for Boruto not to reveal that Kashin Koji exists outside of the fact that Amado is watching. And we do get a panel of Amado watching this bit of the conversation, which seems to imply narratively that Amado doesn't know that Kashin Koji is still alive, and Boruto is trying to keep it that way. Maybe because if Amado did know that Kashin Koji was still alive, he'd have some capacity to shut him down. Konohamaru then goes on to say that this isn't worth a discussion. You're a traitor who got chased out of his village. Why would we believe your baseless lie? But Boruto tells him, we need each other. You want to kill me, but you can't do it until you get the information that I have out of me. And it's at this point that Hamura decides to open his oatmeal catcher, telling Boruto, don't get cocky. You're just a rebel. No matter what the goals of the Shinju are, it won't change what we as Konoha are going to do. We eliminate hostile elements with the entirety of our force. That's all. And it's like, well, usually I'd be like, damn, kind of hard. That's like George W. Bush being like, now watch this drive. You in what army, Hamura? Are you gonna sick your heavy hitters of Choji and Sai on the Shinju to scrounge out Genma out of retirement so we can spit a toothpick at him? What are we talking about here? Yeah, you got Delta and Kawaki and they got dog walked. Hamura continues on by saying, no matter what you say or how you say it, it's all the same. Don't think for a moment you'll walk out of that room alive. Boruto, we're asking you this deliberately, and be prepared to answer. And it's this point that Koharu, who can barely keep her eyes open during a legal proceeding, decides to throw her hat in the ring when it comes down to how this interview is gonna play out. Sound familiar? To anyone? Koharu chips in by saying, Boruto, on that note, I'm gonna need you to answer something for me. Depending on your answer, we may kill you swiftly or very slowly. She then asks Boruto, why did you kill the 7th Hokage? What was the reason? We then cut to Shikamaru, who's watching all of this happen. And we get a flashback of a conversation that Shikamaru and Boruto had. Where Shikamaru is telling Boruto, I understand your feelings very well. However, if you have no intention of killing Kawaki, I need you to remain guilty of killing Naruto. We then see something rather interesting and something that we knew would happen, I guess technically. See, during this memory that Shikamaru was reflecting on of the conversation he had with Boruto, he says that the impact of ... was caused by Kawaki. Now this is weird because what's blanked out here? And the answer to that question is the word omnipotence. See, when Shikamaru broke through the veil of omnipotence and had a conversation with Boruto as one of his allies, Boruto established to Shikamaru that even though you've broken through the power of omnipotence, the way omnipotence works is that eventually it will re-affect you. Even though now you have the ability to discern the fact that me and Kawaki's positions have been swapped and that I didn't kill Naruto, as time progresses, the ability to discern the correct objective truth will fade. And that's exactly what's happening to Shikamaru in this one sentence. Shikamaru goes on to remember this conversation, as he remembers how he told Boruto about how the two of them have to push back against Kawaki, but Kawaki can't figure out they're doing that. Shikamaru goes on to say that I have no problem with exposing what Kawaki did, but if we do that, it's going to put Konoha at odds with him. And thus Shikamaru once again confirms with Boruto, you are still going to be pursued. Is that okay? To which Boruto responds by saying, I don't care. That was always my intention. Now we then hop back to Shikamaru in the present moment, who's thinking to himself, wait, what Kawaki caused? What was it? What is my reasoning? Why do I trust Boruto? I don't understand. I don't know. This is Uzumaki Boruto without any reason. For some reason, I believe in him. And it's at this point that Shikamaru tells himself that if you believe in Boruto, eventually you'll be able to remember the decision that you made. If I believe in Boruto, everything will eventually make sense. And thus Shikamaru says, this guy Boruto, I can't let him die in a place like this. Showing that while Shikamaru was losing his grasp on his knowledge of omnipotence, he still trusts in Boruto enough to know he needs to get Boruto out of this situation. We then cut to Boruto, who's looking at Konohamaru and telling him, I didn't kill anybody. The 7th Hokage is still alive. His wife is with him too, in a safe place. Now this stuns everybody who's listening, and Koharu says, are you serious? What did you say? They're safe? Tell us where they are. Why are you leaving out details? But Boruto, once again, stonewalls them by saying, I can't tell you. And we see that Ada is kind of taken aback by this. We then get 2 panels of Kawaki hanging on what seems to be the least comfortable couch I've ever seen in my entire life. Amuro then chips in by saying, after all this time of us thinking they're dead, all you're gonna say is, I can't say, and honestly, once again, kind of fair. Which Boruto responds by saying, I'm saying I don't want to talk, but I haven't lied once. And to this point, the Koharu says, do you want to die suffering? And Ibiki begins to walk up to the side of Boruto, saying, don't say you weren't warned. Now, to this point, that the probably almost 60-year-old Ibiki says, I've been waiting for this. Prepare yourself. This has been a long time coming. And listen, man, that's just love of the game. That's just the dedication to torturing. He's been thinking about torturing this teenager for 3 years. You won't find that kind of dedication to the game in this new generation. They just don't have the fire for it. Now, to this point, the Shikamaru, who's about to see a 16-year-old get tortured by a man 40 years older than him, pretty desperately reaches out to Ino and says, hey, Ino, how's Inojin doing? To which Ino responds by saying, he's safe. He's still asleep, but there's no problem. To which Shikamaru goes, okay, yeah, good. I need help. He tells Ino that he's in the midst of a bad situation, and that Shikamaru wants to be able to talk to Boruto in private, without the prying eyes of Ada. And thus he tells Ino to get him involved in the communication that they're currently having immediately. Now, I find this rather interesting because it seems as though Shikamaru is able to initiate phone calls with Ino, and why is that how that would work? Do they just have an open phone line constantly? That's really the only way that I could possibly explain that. Now, Ino is taken aback by this request and asks him, is that an order from you as the Hokage? And this response catches Shikamaru off guard as he just says, Ino? Now, Ino decides to put her foot down here by saying, I told you before. Heart-to-heart communication for personal use is a violation. There's also an obligation to report the contents of communications to stop the unauthorized usage of heart-to-heart communication. And thus, Yuge talking like this has already broken 5 regulations. And I have so many problems with all of this. Yes, I get that learning about omnipotence fades, but Ino is inherently privy to any and all conversations that Shikamaru and Boruto had, and thus she's privy to as much information about the Shinju and omnipotence as Shikamaru is. She should have a natural curiosity for what's going on over with Boruto, especially when you consider the fact that she's one of the most important people involved in the protection of Konoha. Also, why is heart-to-heart communication illegal? There is a girl out there whose side she's on is ambiguous, who the only way to hide information from is to use mind transmission communication. And I get that Ino's new job in Boruto is kind of to be a cop, but why is she being such a goddamn cop? Now, Shikamaru, who objectively does not have to deal with any of this, says, I told you already, it's a top secret mission. I can only trust you. But Ino clips back at him and says, I don't understand why you're trusting Boruto so blindly. It's so blindly. You heard the conversation, and tells Shikamaru that he shouldn't continue on like this. Shikamaru then thinks back at her and says, I know you can't trust him, but please help me. Lend me your strength. I'm not giving an order as the Hokage. I'm asking as a comrade. And it's like, hey man, give an order as the Hokage. But as Ino looks down at the unconscious Inojin, who'd probably be dead without Boruto, mind you, she says, cool your head, Shikamaru. I shouldn't keep going on like this. I'm sorry, but I can't help you this time. And in response to this, Shikamaru yells, wait, Ino, and she severs the connection, which makes it appear as though Ino is no longer on Team Boruto, which means that Shikamaru now has no way to communicate with Boruto in a way that Ada won't see, unless, of course, Inojin wakes up, is snapped out of omnipotence, and uses the Yamanaka mind transmission jutsu to be the telecommunication systems that Shikamaru and Boruto use to communicate. But then again, I don't know anything about that, but I might know something about that by Tuesday. Noti Bell, Cody, Ross the air horns, Noti Bell. Now Ibiki, who's just so much bigger than Boruto, is now looming over Boruto's shoulder, saying that if the 7th is alive, tell me where he is. He then continues on by saying, naturally, I can't trust you, but if you don't talk, I'll kill you. And it's at this point that the man who has ninjutsu that quite literally makes torture devices decides to really get super sophisticated with his torture means and just grabs Boruto by the back of the head and slams his head into the table. And like, hey, Ibiki, haven't you heard? You don't lead with the head. The person you're interrogating. They get all fuzzy. Now, it's this point that Ibiki starts to whisper some sweet nothings into Boruto's ears by saying, Boruto, I've been itching to punch you for the past 3 years. To which Boruto lands just an absolutely fantastic retort by saying, you must have been bored. I envy you. And for the price of this incredible comeback, he gets a right hook. Ibiki then throws a punch into his stomach, which causes Boruto to cough up blood. Ibiki then decides to, and this might just be a bad translation, throw a compliment in the mix here by saying, you're good looking, but how long will you be good looking will be a genuine sight to see. Or something like that. The translation I have says, you're good looking, but until when will you continue? It's a sight to see. Now, fortunately, we don't have to find out how mangled Boruto is going to become at the fists of Ibiki, because Shikamaru interjects and says, enough already. It's useless. He's in too much pain already to even open his mouth. We should use poison to kill him. Call Mitsuki. Now, Konohamaru turns around and says, Hokage, I don't think that's a good idea. Mitsuki still wants this guy dead. If we're not careful, Mitsuki might end up killing him the second he sees him. And that's hardly an interrogation. And it's like, hey man, the 60-year-old with all the scars on his face has just told the 16-year-old he was gonna kill him. It seems as though Boruto's death is kind of a foregone conclusion here. Now, Shikamaru says, I don't care. I'll take responsibility. Just call him immediately. It's at this point that we cut to Ada and Daemon and Kawaki. And Ada is telling Kawaki that Boruto doesn't want to tell them what you did. He's trying to protect you. Now this catches Kawaki by surprise, and Ada follows up by saying he's refusing to say that where Naruto is or how he got there in the first place. He's just saying that he's alive and safe. Now Kawaki seems relatively dumbfounded by this, and the same thing with Daemon, who says, why? That makes no sense. Why would he do that? We then come back to the interrogation room, and Mitsuki is there. And as Mitsuki goes to reach for the doorknob to enter into the interrogation room, Shikamaru grabs his hand and says to him, Mitsuki, we are shinobi. Control your emotions and focus on the mission. Fulfill your duty. Got it? Now, well, this makes it sound as though Shikamaru is simply telling Mitsuki to not kill Boruto. And since we know the motivations of everyone involved, this is Shikamaru telling Mitsuki, get Boruto out. And thus Mitsuki enters the interrogation room. And as he enters, Konohamaru turns around to him and says, this guy is an important witness. Listen, Mitsuki, he holds crucial information. The goal is to extract that information. Just to be clear, make sure you don't kill him. But Boruto, probably because Ibiki didn't punch him quite hard enough, says, hey, Mitsuki, are you still searching like a fool? I'm talking about your son, the one that you mentioned. And Mitsuki seemingly doesn't like this at all, immediately activating his Snake Sage mode, which feels unnecessary considering the fact that Boruto is handcuffed to a chair. But he probably did it so he could close the distance between himself and Boruto as fast as possible. Because before anybody is able to react, Mitsuki is on top of Boruto, yelling at him, saying, is that all you have to say, you ungrateful traitor? Now, both Konohamaru and Ibiki try to stop Mitsuki, but before they can, Mitsuki has a snake slither down Boruto's arm and open his handcuffs. And you're probably thinking, Nick, it's probably not so easy to open these incredibly complicated jutsu sealing handcuffs, right? A snake, there's no way it could do it. Right? And no, the snake just kind of boops it, and these handcuffs, which undoubtedly cost millions of Ryo to create, are on the floor. We only have 2 Thunderline trains across all of Konoha because we keep dumping all of our money into Amado's warfare research. And yet they're not snake boop proof. This is what the billions in defense budget is getting us? Mitsuki then whispers in Boruto's ear and says personal belongings are in the West Wing security room. Guards are on duty 24/7. That's why I told you. Ibiki is then successful in pulling Mitsuki off of Boruto, but it's too late. His jutsus are no longer sealed. Boruto then pulls up his one hand and says, I'll say, I have no intention of treating you guys like enemies. I'll provide you with information if necessary. That's my judgment. Which way you guys handle that information and our relationship is up to you. And then poof. He's gone. And it's at that point that Konohamaru realizes that the handcuffs are on the ground. And it's like, hey man, how are you just not realizing the handcuffs are on the ground? His hand didn't have them. He was holding it in front of his face. But Konohamaru seems to believe that somehow Boruto broke the handcuff seal and that Mitsuki and his snake had nothing to do with it. Boruto then pops into the West Wing security room as he jumps to presumably his sword, as Boruto can only jump to inanimate objects that he's marked previously. And 2 guards are absolutely stunned to see him standing there. But he takes time to make sure that they know that they're doing a good job by saying, hey, don't worry, this isn't your fault. Then proceeding to disappear again. We then cut back to the interrogation room. Mitsuki is talking to Konohamaru saying, forgive me. But Konohamaru is saying, it's okay, relax. It's the 8th who authorized you coming here in the first place. This couldn't be helped. Don't worry. Now, it's this point that Koharu, who apparently can't see, asks, what happened? At which point Hamura says we had the chance of a lifetime to kill him, and we failed. Now, it's this point that Shikamaru kicks in to supposed Hokage, who's definitely not on Boruto's side, when he says, I'm very sorry, search for him immediately, knowing that Boruto is long gone. Koharu, possibly seeing through this ruse, says the daimyo is gonna be real upset with you, Shikamaru. You should be careful. Losing Boruto like this is gonna put a target on your back. We then cut Shikamaru back in the Hokage's office, and Sarada's kicking down his door, pushing past his guards, saying, I just want to talk. Now, Shikamaru tells his guards to just let them through. Now, Sarada bolts into the Hokage's office, asking where Boruto is, if he got away or what's happening. And it's at this point Shikamaru tells Sarada that Boruto was able to escape the village, which leaves her awestruck. But before we can hang on Sarada for too long, Shikamaru gets a call. From the hidden sand. And on the other side of this call is Kankuro, who reveals that Gaara has been attacked. And also that the translation for some reason here is stepson, which would imply that Kankuro and Gaara got married and adopted Shinki, but in actuality Shinki is his nephew, has been injured. And Kankuro goes on to apologize for the sudden contact, however the situation is too pressing to not reach out to Konoha. Now Shikamaru asks what happened, at which point Kankuro lets us know regarding Shinki, it's the same symptoms as the tree. Kankuro goes on to say, fortunately, the both of them are still alive. I apologize for the sudden contact, but please lend us your strength. And with that, we smash cut to the new Shinju, who's standing on top of the black box in the Shinju hideout in front of the other 4. And amongst them, Jura asks, have you awakened? How do you feel? Ryu? And in some translations, it seems as though Jura calls this new Shinju, who's presumably made from Shinki, Ryu. R-Y-U-U, which translates directly to grain. Now, this would kind of make sense when you consider the fact that Shinki is a magnet release user. However, Shinki doesn't use grains of sand. He uses iron, and you wouldn't really describe anything as it pertains to units of iron as grain. But whatever. The important takeaway here is that in some capacity or another, Shinki has awoken as a Shinju. As to whether or not Gaara is also somehow in that mix, because it's also said that Gaara was also injured, we can't necessarily say. But so far as we know, Kankuro said that the injuries that Shinki sustained were of the tree. And at least so far as my translations go, he didn't say anything about Gaara being in a tree. So you were right. Is that what you want from me? That I'm a big, dumb, stupid head? That I put my heart out here and I'm like, oh, this would be a fun theory, and then boom, character we haven't seen in 100 chapters.
Oh, Nick, there isn't even 100 chapters support.
You get what I'm saying. But anyways, while yes, not a huge amount happened in this chapter, Boruto has been sprung from jail like he was in the MHA universe. The 5th Shinju is Shinki, and Moegi Shinju is named after a festival in Japan dedicated for raising money for HIV research. While it wasn't the craziest chapter of all time, it has set us up for what could be an absolutely massive chapter 15. So what did you guys think of this chapter? Did you enjoy Mitsuki coming to the side of Team Boruto now officially? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell.